I, 30 farads, am facing one of the most challenging decisions of my life, and I'm turning to this community for advice and perspective. To understand my current situation, I need to take you back to where it all began, over a decade ago. My father was once a successful businessman, respected in our community, and the primary breadwinner for our family. We lived comfortably in a suburban neighborhood outside of Boston, and I never had to worry about anything. That all changed when I was in my late teens. My father's business partner betrayed him, embezzling a significant amount of money and leaving the company in ruins. Overnight, our family's financial stability crumbled. The aftermath was devastating. My father, once confident and charismatic, fell into a deep depression. He spent days in bed, barely speaking or eating. My mother, a nurse at a local hospital, suddenly became the sole provider for our family. She picked up extra shifts, working long hours to keep us afloat. The bills piled up, and the stress in our house was palpable. As if the financial strain wasn't enough, my parents' behavior towards my younger brother and me began to change dramatically. My brother, 25M, had always been academically gifted, excelling in his studies without much effort. In contrast, while I did well in school, I was more interested in extracurricular activities like basketball and debate club. Before the financial crisis, my parents had always supported both of our interests equally. However, as our family's situation worsened, they started to view my brother as their ticket out of financial hardship. They poured all their remaining resources and energy into supporting his education, convinced that his academic success would secure a better future for all of us. Meanwhile, I found myself increasingly sidelined and criticized. My father, when he did emerge from his bedroom, would make cutting remarks about my grades and activities. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" he'd say, his voice tinged with disappointment. "If you're not going to be the best, what's the point of even trying?" These comments stung, especially coming from the man who had once been my biggest cheerleader. My mother, overwhelmed with work and caring for my father, began to echo his sentiments. She'd sigh heavily when looking at my report cards, even though my grades were still above average. "We can't afford mediocrity," she'd mutter, as if my B+ in chemistry was a personal affront to our family's struggle. The situation came to a head one evening when my parents called me into the living room for a family meeting. My brother was conspicuously absent. As I sat on the edge of the worn couch, my stomach knotted with anxiety. I could tell something significant was about to happen. My father, looking older and more haggard than I'd ever seen him, cleared his throat. "We've been talking," he began, his voice gravelly from disuse, "and we've come to a difficult decision." My mother sat beside him, her eyes fixed on the floor, refusing to meet my gaze. "We can't afford to support both you and your brother anymore," my father continued. "Your grandmother suggested a solution. Your uncle and his wife have always wanted children, but couldn't have any. They're willing to take you in." I felt as if the ground had opened up beneath me. "What about my brother?" I managed to choke out. My mother finally looked up, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Your brother's academic potential. We believe it's best for him to stay with us so his education isn't disrupted. You'll have a fresh start with your uncle and aunt. We can focus on supporting your brother's future." The words hit me like a physical blow. They were choosing my brother over me, deciding that his potential was worth more than mine. I burst into tears, pleading with them to reconsider, promising to work harder, to get better grades. But their minds were made up. "As the oldest, you should understand the need for sacrifice," my mother said, her voice wavering. "Your brother has a better chance of becoming someone extraordinary. This is what's best for the family." In a daze, I packed my belongings and moved in with my uncle and aunt. They lived in a small town about an hour away, far enough that I had to change schools for my senior year. Saying goodbye to my brother was heart-wrenching. He clung to me, not fully understanding why I had to leave, and I didn't have the heart to tell him the truth. The first few months at my uncle and aunt's house were a blur of grief and adjustment. They were kind and did their best to make me feel welcome, But the pain of rejection from my parents was a constant ache. I threw myself into my studies and extracurricular activities, determined to prove my worth, even if my parents weren't there to see it. Gradually, I began to notice the differences in my new environment. My uncle, unlike my father, didn't get angry over small things. He was patient and encouraging, always ready to listen when I needed to talk. My aunt, while strict about ensuring I did my homework, also encouraged me to pursue my interests. They let me play basketball and join the debate team, understanding the importance of a well-rounded education. For the first time in years, I felt seen and valued for who I was, not just for my academic performance. This support allowed me to flourish in ways I never thought possible. My grades improved, not because of pressure, but because I genuinely enjoyed learning. I rediscovered my passion for problem solving and critical thinking, skills that would serve me well in the future. As I approached graduation, I faced a new challenge: college applications. My parents had made it clear they wouldn't be contributing to my education, so I threw myself into researching scholarships and financial aid options. My aunt and uncle offered to help where they could, but I was determined to make it on my own. Through a combination of academic scholarships, part-time work, and student loans, I managed to secure a place at a respected state university. The day I received my acceptance letter was bittersweet. I was thrilled to have this opportunity, but a part of me still yearned for my parents' approval and support. I called home to share the news, hoping that my achievement might bridge the gap that had grown between us. My mother answered, her voice distant and distracted. When I told her about my college acceptance, her response was lukewarm at best. "That's nice, dear," she said, sounding preoccupied. "Your brother just got accepted into an Ivy League school. We're so proud of him." The conversation ended shortly after, leaving me feeling hollow and more alone than ever. It was clear that no matter what I achieved, it would never be enough in their eyes. That day, I made a decision that would shape the course of my life. I would succeed, not for my parents' approval, but for myself. College was a transformative experience, free from the constant comparison to my brother and the weight of my parents' disappointment. I thrived. I double majored in computer science and business, driven by a newfound passion for technology and entrepreneurship. The skills I had honed in debate club served me well in my business classes, while my problem-solving abilities flourished in my coding courses. During my junior year, I interned at a promising tech startup. The fast-paced environment and innovative spirit of the company ignited a fire in me. I worked tirelessly, impressing my supervisors with my dedication and fresh ideas. By the time I graduated, I had a job offer from the startup, which I eagerly accepted. The years that followed were a whirlwind of hard work, late nights, and steadily increasing success. I climbed the ranks quickly, my unique combination of technical knowledge and business acumen setting me apart from my peers. At 27, I was offered a position as the head of a new division within the company, tasked with developing cutting-edge AI applications for business analytics. It was around this time that I received an unexpected call from my brother. We had kept in sporadic contact over the years, mainly through occasional text messages and social media interactions. He sounded excited and a little nervous as he shared his news. He was planning to start his own business with a college friend. "That's fantastic," I said, genuinely happy for him. "What's your business plan?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Well, that's kind of why I'm calling," he admitted. "We have a great idea, but we're struggling with the technical aspects and financial projections. I was hoping maybe you could help." I felt a mix of emotions at his request. Part of me was thrilled that he had reached out, that he valued my expertise enough to ask for help. Another part felt a twinge of resentment after years of being compared unfavorably to him. Here he was, needing my assistance. In the end, my love for my brother won out over any lingering bitterness. "Of course I'll help," I told him. "Send me what you have, and we can set up a video call to go through it." Over the next few months, I spent countless hours helping my brother refine his business plan. offering technical advice, and even introducing him to potential investors from my network. It felt good to reconnect with him, to build a relationship as adults that wasn't overshadowed by our parents' favoritism. As my brother's business began to take shape, I found myself at a crossroads in my own career. The startup I had joined was now a major player in the tech industry, and my role had grown significantly. However, I felt a growing desire to strike out on my own, to build something from the ground up. With the encouragement of my aunt and uncle, who had become more like parents to me over the years, I took the leap. I left my comfortable corporate jobs and founded my own tech company, focusing on developing AI solutions for small and medium-sized businesses. The first year was tough. There were moments of doubt when I wondered if I had made the right decision. But I persevered, drawing on the resilience I had developed over years of facing challenges. Slowly but surely, my company began to gain traction. By the end of the second year, we had a solid client base and were turning a profit. As my company grew, so did my confidence and sense of self-worth. I was no longer the insecure teenager desperate for her parents' approval. I was a successful entrepreneur, respected in my field, and surrounded by a supportive network of friends and colleagues. It was during this time of personal and professional growth that I received an invitation that would force me to confront my past, my grandmother's 75th birthday party. The invitation, sent by my mother via email, was brief and formal, nothing like the warm, loving grandmother I remembered from my childhood. As I stared at the invitation on my computer screen, a flood of emotions washed over me. I hadn't seen my parents or grandmother in person for over a decade. The thought of facing them, of being in the same room with the people who had essentially discarded me, filled me with anxiety. But there was also a part of me that was curious. How would they react to the person I had become? Would they finally see my worth? And most importantly, did I even care about their opinion anymore? After days of internal debate and long conversations with my aunt and uncle, I decided to attend. If nothing else, I wanted to see my grandmother and brother. I booked my flight, reserved a hotel room, and prepared myself emotionally for what promised to be a pivotal moment in my life. Little did I know that this family gathering would set in motion a series of events that would force me to confront my past, reassess my relationships, and ultimately make a decision that would shape the future of my family dynamics forever. As I pack my bags for the upcoming trip, I find myself filled with a mix of anticipation and dread. How will my parents react when they see the successful woman I've become? Will they finally acknowledge their mistakes, or will they continue to dismiss my achievements? And most importantly, am I ready to face the pain of my past and make a decision about my future relationship with them? I'd appreciate any advice or insights from those who have been in similar situations. How do you handle reuniting with family members who have hurt you deeply? Is it possible to rebuild a relationship after years of neglect and favoritism? Or is it sometimes better to leave the past in the past and move forward on your own terms? Update 1. It's been about a year since my last post, and a lot has happened. I wanted to give you all an update on my situation and share some recent developments in my family dynamics. First, I want to thank everyone who offered advice and support in the comments of my original post. Your insights gave me a lot to think about and helped me navigate some difficult decisions. As I mentioned in my original post, I had founded my own tech company focusing on AI solutions for small and medium-sized businesses. I'm thrilled to share that our company has experienced significant growth over the past year. We've expanded our client base considerably and have even opened a second office in Austin, Texas. The journey hasn't been easy, but the challenges and rewards of building something from the ground up have been incredibly fulfilling. Our success has allowed me to purchase my own home, a modern condo in a vibrant part of the city. It's a far cry from the cramped apartment I was renting when I started this venture, and every time I walk through the door, I'm reminded of how far I've come. While my professional life has been thriving, my relationship with my parents remains strained. We've had minimal contact over the past year, mainly consisting of obligatory holiday text messages and the occasional update about my grandmother's health. However, an unexpected situation arose that forced me to confront my family history once again. A few months ago, I received a call from my brother. He sounded stressed and a bit desperate. He explained that the tech company he had been working for had undergone massive layoffs due to the economic downturn, and he had lost his job. To make matters worse, the startup he had been working on with his friend was struggling to get off the ground. "I hate to ask this," he said, his voice tight with embarrassment, "but I was wondering if you might be willing to invest in our business. We have a solid idea, but we're struggling with the technical implementation and funding." I felt a mix of emotions at his request. Part of me was happy that he felt he could turn to me for help, but another part felt a twinge of resentment. After all, our parents had poured all their resources into his education and future, and now he was coming to me for support. However, I quickly pushed those feelings aside. My brother and I had maintained a decent relationship over the years, despite our parents' favoritism. He had never treated me poorly or lorded his status over me. In fact, he had always been supportive of my endeavors, even if from a distance. After careful consideration, I decided to invest in his business. I didn't even ask for a detailed business plan. My primary motivation was to support my brother and help him get back on his feet. I told him I didn't care if the business failed, I just wanted to have his back when no one else did. To my pleasant surprise, my brother's business has started to show promise. While it hasn't taken off dramatically, it's steadily growing, and he's incredibly grateful for my belief in him. This experience has brought us closer, and we now have regular video calls to discuss both business and personal matters. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents remains complicated. Through my brother, I've learned that my father is still unemployed. He occasionally does some consulting work, but he hasn't held a steady job since his business failed all those years ago. My mother continues to work as a nurse, supporting the household financially. What's particularly frustrating is that despite my success and my support of my brother, my parents still seem unable to acknowledge my achievements. When my brother mentioned my company's success to them, their response was lukewarm at best. My mother reportedly said, "That's nice," before quickly changing the subject to my brother's progress. This continued dismissal of my accomplishments is hurtful, but I've come to realize that it says more about them than it does about me. Their inability to recognize my success seems rooted in their own insecurities and the narrative they've constructed about our family. My aunt and uncle, on the other hand, have been incredibly supportive. They've become my true parental figures, celebrating my successes and offering comfort during challenging times. I make sure to call them regularly and send thoughtful gifts for birthdays and holidays. Their unwavering support has been a constant source of strength for me. As I reflect on the past year, I'm struck by how much has changed, yet how some things remain the same. I've achieved a level of success I once only dreamed of, and I've been able to help my brother in a meaningful way. Yet the wound of my parents' rejection still lingers, even if it's not as raw as it once was. I find myself at another crossroads. Part of me wants to reach out to my parents, to try one more time to build a relationship. Another part feels that I've moved on, that I've built a fulfilling life without them and don't need their approval anymore. I'm curious to hear from those who have been in similar situations. How do you balance personal growth and success with unresolved family issues? Is it worth trying to reconnect with parents who have consistently undervalued you? Or is it better to focus on the positive relationships in your life? Thank you all again for your support and advice. It means more than you know. Update 2. It's been a few months since my last update, and recent events have compelled me to share with this community once again. Your previous advice and support have been invaluable, and I'm hoping for some perspective on my current situation. About a month ago, I received an invitation to my grandmother's 75th birthday party. The invitation came via email from my mother, brief and formal. Seeing this stirred up a whirlwind of emotions. I hadn't seen my parents or grandmother in person for over a decade. After much deliberation and conversations with my aunt and uncle, I decided to attend. The day of the party arrived, and I found myself standing outside my parents' house. I took a deep breath, straightened my designer blazer, and rang the doorbell. My mother answered, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. I could see the shock in her eyes as she took in my appearance. She awkwardly greeted me with a hug that felt more obligatory than warm. The party was a tense affair. I could feel eyes on me as I mingled with relatives I barely remembered. My grandmother seemed genuinely happy to see me, though our interaction was brief and overshadowed by the palpable tension between me and my parents. During a lull in the party, my father approached me and started asking questions about my job and position, his tone a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. When I mentioned that I had bought my own home, he scoffed, expressing disbelief that I could afford a house at my age. Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and hurt came pouring out. I told him that not everyone is a failure who depends on their spouse for financial support. I pointed out how his lack of faith in me had been incredibly painful growing up, how I was constantly criticized and compared to my brother. "I'm not that little girl anymore," I said, my voice low but intense. "I'm doing quite well for myself, not that I have to prove it to you. The fact that you can't recognize my achievements speaks more about your insecurities than about me." I then pointed out how I was the one who had invested in his talented son's business when he had no other prospects. The room fell silent, and I could see the hurt in my father's eyes, but a part of me felt justified in finally standing up for myself. That night, unable to sleep, I made a decision. I needed to express all the hurt and disappointment I had carried for years. I wrote a long, emotionally charged email to my parents, recounting each incident where they had failed me. I told them how desperately I had needed them as a child, and how now I couldn't care less about their existence. Before I could second-guess myself, I hit send. A week later, my mother called me, crying and apologizing for agreeing to send me away to live with my aunt and uncle. She explained that they had no other choice at the time, and admitted that guilt was one of the main reasons she had distanced herself over the years. I listened to her apologies, but found myself unmoved. I told her that her reasons no longer mattered to me because our relationship was beyond repair. I no longer considered them as my parents. This deeply upset my mother, and she repeatedly asked me to let things go so we could start afresh. My father hasn't made any effort to contact me, though my mother mentioned that he was emotional after reading my email. For now, I've chosen to maintain my distance from my parents, as I have always done. I feel a mix of relief at finally expressing my feelings and guilt for potentially hurting them. But mostly, I feel a sense of closure. I'm turning to this community once again for advice. Was I too harsh in my email? Should I consider giving my parents another chance? Or is it healthier for me to maintain this distance? How do you move forward after confronting years of family trauma? Thank you all in advance for your insights and support. Update 3. It's been a few weeks since my last update, and I wanted to share some significant developments in my family situation. Your support and advice have been invaluable throughout this journey. 3 days after sending that emotionally charged email to my parents, I received a call from my mother. As soon as I heard her voice, I knew this conversation would be different from any we'd had before. "I read your email," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry. We failed you in so many ways." What followed was a conversation that left me emotionally drained, but also strangely lighter. My mother apologized profusely for agreeing to send me to live with my aunt and uncle all those years ago. She explained that at the time, they truly believed they had no other choice. The financial strain was overwhelming, and they thought they were doing what was best for both my brother and me. She admitted that seeing the pain in my eyes whenever we met afterward made her hate herself. This self-loathing, combined with guilt, was one of the main reasons she had distanced herself over the years. "Every time I saw you succeeding, I was proud," she confessed. "But I was also ashamed. ashamed that we hadn't been there to support you, that we had essentially abandoned you. As I listened to my mother's apologies and explanations, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. Part of me wanted to hang up, to tell her it was too little, too late. But another part yearned for this acknowledgement, this validation of my pain. When she finished speaking, I took a deep breath and responded. I thanked her for the apology, but made it clear that her reasons, guilt, and shame didn't change what happened. I explained how their actions had affected me, how I had struggled with self-worth issues for years, how I had pushed myself to succeed partly out of a desperate need to prove my value. I've built a life for myself, I said, a good life, with people who truly care about me. I'm proud of what I've accomplished, and I've done it without your support. I'm not sure I'm ready to let you back into my life. I'm not sure I ever will be. My mother listened quietly, occasionally murmuring words of understanding. When I finished, she asked if there was any chance of rebuilding our relationship. I told her honestly that I didn't know. The hurt runs deep, and trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. After the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time, processing everything that had been said. The conversation had been cathartic in many ways, allowing me to express feelings I had bottled up for years. But it had also opened old wounds, bringing back memories of the pain and rejection I had experienced. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on my journey and the people who had truly been there for me. My thoughts kept returning to my aunt and uncle, who had provided the love and support my parents couldn't or wouldn't give. I decided to plan a surprise for them. Using some of the profits from my successful business venture, I booked a luxury vacation to a destination my aunt had always dreamed of visiting. When I presented them with the trip details, their reaction was overwhelming. My aunt burst into tears, hugging me tightly, while my uncle looked on with pride and gratitude in his eyes. As we discussed the upcoming trip, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. These were the people who had shaped me, who had nurtured my potential, and helped me become the person I am today. They were my real family. This realization helped me come to terms with my feelings about my parents. While I appreciate my mother's apology and acknowledgement of their mistakes, I'm not ready to let them back into my life. Perhaps I never will be, and that's okay. Family isn't just about blood relations, it's about the people who stand by you, support you, and love you unconditionally. Looking ahead, I feel a sense of excitement about the future. My business continues to thrive, and I'm exploring new opportunities for expansion. I'm maintaining a good relationship with my brother, supporting him as he grows his own business. And I'm cherishing the bond I have with my aunt and uncle, grateful for their unwavering love and support. As for my parents, I've decided to take things one day at a time. I'm not closing the door entirely, but I'm also not rushing to let them back in. My focus is on nurturing the positive relationships in my life and continuing to grow both personally and professionally. I want to thank this community once again for your support throughout this journey. If anyone has experience with rebuilding or choosing not to rebuild relationships with estranged parents, I'd appreciate your insights. How do you balance self-protection with the possibility of reconciliation? How do you move forward without letting past hurts define you? Thank you all for being a part of my journey. Your support means more than you know.